Welcome. It is quite appropriate this morning. I did not get one text message or phone call asking if we were going to have this today. It was raining pretty bad this morning. My first winter down here was 2015, 2016. And Paul texted me a morning in which it was 32 degrees with a 20-mile-an-hour wind. He said, "Tim, I'll see you on the course." So I show up by myself with Paul. So I said, "Paul, it's too cold to play." Well, he looked at me like, "What, are you crazy?" So he said, "Let's play one set." So we played one set. Then we went to McDonald's, and the early birds were all having coffee. And somebody said, "Well, nobody played tennis this morning." Paul said, "Tim and I played 3 sets." So glad nobody called today. Everybody knew we were going to have this regardless of what. We're here to honor Paul's life. We're also here to honor Barbara and her entire family, because the Ruskos have done so much for Anne Arundel County and done so much for Ocean Pines. So we want to honor the entire family today. I'm going to introduce a very good friend, Bill Gilroy. Bill is a retired pastor from Lexington, retired chaplain from the Naval Academy, coaches Severn's tennis team. We brought Severn's team down here in March. We had our first annual Paul Rusko Memorial Tennis Tournament. And this is going to be an annual thing that Bill and I do. Bill is an early bird, and he is quite a tennis player. Bill?
We're not drunk.
Let us pray. O Lord our God, we are gathered here today to remember and honor someone who has not only touched our lives, but also the lives of so many others in so many positive ways. As St. Paul reminds us, you have blessed us all with so many varied and wonderful gifts, and have inspired us to use the gifts with which we have been blessed to touch and enhance the lives of others. Paul Rusko truly understood the gifts with which he was blessed, and as a result of his desire to make good use of them, there are many here now, as well as countless others, whose lives have been made richer and fuller as a result of the dedicated, compassionate, and exemplary efforts Paul made to fulfill his calling in life, as you inspired him to do. A talented athlete, teacher, coach, and administrator, he has been honored for his accomplishments in various ways. And yet there is no doubt that he found greater satisfaction and joy in the successes achieved by those he influenced by his own dedication to his calling, and those he mentored and encouraged along the way. A man of faith and honor, a man who loved his family dearly, a man who befriended and inspired others in so many ways throughout the years, and in recent years on these tennis courts where we now stand. Paul Rusko will no doubt always be a part of the lives of those blessed to have known him and loved him. Although he has now made the journey we all one day must make, and found the new life beyond the grave and gate of death his faith in you has made possible for him, he will continue to remain with us in our memories and in our hearts. And for that we are truly thankful. And as a reminder of what he has meant to us, we dedicate now this bench in his memory. May it inspire those who play here to be like Paul, an inspiration to others, a competitor who was always determined to give nothing but his best effort in anything he did, and a man of honor, integrity, faith, and love, whose life among us has made us all better by the fact that he has been a part of our lives. So we thank you, Lord, for this day, for this opportunity to remember and honor someone so special, and most of all for having known Paul Rusko as a companion during our journey here on earth. Thank you for the gift he has been for all of us. In your holy name we pray.
Amen.
I would like all of my active teachers and retired teachers to please stand up. Come on. We were all taught to do an overview of our lesson plan to start out. So let me do a quick interview and thank you for being dedicated to education. Gary Undercoffer is our racket court director. He will go first. Then our early birds will talk. Bill Matero and Brett Parsons, where are you, Brett? They will talk on the early birds. On education, Al Kramer, where are you? Hal and I will talk about education. Then we'll turn it over to the Rusko family, and they will be magically escaped. Carrie, it's all yours.
Wanted to acknowledge some special people today. But Paul is the one who encouraged me to begin coaching tennis. He knew I coached soccer since 1970s. He said, since I played with him in the morning, he said, you should do this. You coach kids, coaching kids in tennis is like coaching kids in soccer. You can continue. You should be able to continue what you love to do. And so he's the one that got me involved with this. And tennis, playing tennis in Ocean Pines, is more than just a racket sport. You make friends. You make lifelong friends. You have fun. You recreate. You try and stay healthy. And Paul, in the times of pandemic, encouraged us to continue to play, but play safely. I want to acknowledge some special people that helped his desire to keep us playing, and to remember the groups of people that came through here and played with that kind of spirit. To acknowledge President of OPTC, John McNulty, sitting in the background. Thank you. Longtime OPTC president and current member who is in charge of the memory garden. Many of you that maybe walked in here today might not know that there's a memory garden for past dedicated OPTC players. There is up there, off to the left, with names and plaques. To all the people that played. Dale Ash, thank you for doing and continuing to do that. It's the kind of things that helps keep those players' memories with us. The people that helped run and set this up, I want to some special acknowledgement. Julie Parsons over there, my head attendant. Bob Grant, Bob Grant, our best public works guy here that makes this place go. My boss, Debbie Donahue, who helped us get this beautiful bench. Over there, say hi to Debbie. And the guy that keeps roping me into things, and he's probably saying the same thing, Tim McMullen, my good friend. I'm having a hard time with this. Every morning, we would come out, and the first thing I would see is someone practicing their serves with a ball, with a bag hanging there. I'm gonna put this can of balls on the bench behind me. Each one of these balls has his initials on it, which was the recommendation from USTA for safe play because we used all our own balls during COVID times. Yeah, it's in his honor and in his memory. Thank you all for being here and coming.
Barbara now is going to continue a routine that I've seen past years. She's going to take Paul's tennis bag. She's going to place it here. Paul did that every morning for 20 years in a row. Some mornings he did it at 5:45. It was pitch dark, and he made us warm up when it was dark. He always wanted an advantage. Barbara, thank you for placing that there. Thank you.
This is his ratty tennis bag that he carried for years, and I would say, he can get you a new one. He probably has something in the closet. These are all my bags, all the years. Ratty. It has a
Now we're going to have Joe Maturo and Red Parsons, and they're going to talk about the early birds, try to explain to you what early birds are. Go ahead.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joe Maturo. And I joined the early birds in the spring of 2004. Although our name is the 18, the 9:30 drop-ins took offense to it. And one of our members in the play, Archer, he wrote it every morning, a big A. Unfortunately, he's passed on. Paul was one of the first to welcome me. It could have been my Penn State year. I had 3 daughters, 2 son-in-laws, 3 grandkids at one time. Or my Italian heritage. Paul was from Pennsylvania. And he knew Penn State well, having wrestled against Penn State many times when he was at Lockhaven, before he met Barbara. In any event, I learned a lot from Paul. By asking. Paul would never volunteer information. I think he didn't want to offend me. But he knew a lot about tennis. And he was a wealth of information. When I was injured a couple of years ago, Paul would crawl off and see how I was doing and encourage my comeback, which I did. I dubbed Paul our protocol officer. Anytime a rule was disputed, Paul would go to that bag and pick out the tattered, worn rule book. And he would solve the problem. If we had one, and he's still playing with us. Always the baby. And I think you know who might be. In addition, as the protocol officer, Paul would direct us. So we'd have 3 courts, 12 people. And he would direct us to what court to go to after each. We each played 4 games. And it was tricky, and it was difficult, directing 8 to 12 guys. Paul and I lived in the park, which is right over there. And we were on the first all-resident board of directors. It was a trying time because Ocean Pines GM and board of directors, they weren't too cooperative. Issues such as drainage problems, snow removal responsibilities, and streets who owned them. Paul would then let the GM and the board in Ocean Pines off the hook. And fortunately, we had a lawyer on our team, Jimmy Tremble, and he spent a lot of hours down in Snow Hill with all the documents, and we proved to the park, to the Pines, who owned what and what each should do. The park prevailed. We have today a well-run, debt-free community thanks to Paul Rusko and his leadership. I miss him.
Hello, my name is Red Parsons. We lived here in the Pines for about 3 years now. We came here as a temporary stop while we sold our house in Millsboro, ended up in a couple rentals, and we rented a place over here on the south side. And we fell in love with the people of Ocean Pines, and Paul Rusko and Barbara being chief among them. I started playing tennis in high school, put down the tennis racket, and traveled full time, raised a family, and hadn't played much for 30 some odd years. When I started playing again, I was down here one morning hitting against the wall. One of the early birds, a whole group of guys over on 3 and 4 here, one of them hollered over for me to come and join them. And I said, well, I'm not much of a player. They said, that's all right, come on over. So I'd never played doubles before in my life. And they welcomed me and took me under their tutelage and helped me. And some might still say I'm still not much of a player, but I have fun and I enjoy it. And we we've been inspired by the fact that people are still active and they're out there and moving around and doing things. And I'm looking forward to when I'm 80 some years old, I'm sitting on the bench with some guy who's just moved into the neighborhood and gets the nickname that I've had as the young one or the kid, because I'm 55 when I was 54 when I started, and I was the youngest by Terry 10 years. So, but have gotten to great friends as a result of that. But I remember several different things that Paul taught me on the court. One was being patient. Tennis is a fast game. You play slow. You wait for that ball to get to you, and just embraced us. And Paul and Barbara became friends. They joined us for dinner Thanksgiving one year, and they've been around us and know all of our children, my 4 daughters. And it's quality people like Paul that cross your path in life that make an impression. And there's so many things that you miss about a person when you stop and think about, well, how would they be involved in your life today? And you miss getting to share things with them. So we miss them out on the courts, that's for sure. I'm going to ask our current and any former early bird members to stand up here for a minute. And we're missing quite a few, but I see a few of them out here. So. Been a while. But I know Paul made an impression on each of you, and he always had a good attitude toward you, a good attitude toward the game. One interesting thing that would often happen when we first got out there, first started playing, you'd hear Paul mumble some words that you might not want to repeat and come up with some phrases that I've never heard in my life. And you're thinking, wow, that shot really wasn't that bad, or I really couldn't have gotten it. He's not talking to you, he's talking to himself. He would beat himself up over a shot that he thought he should have gotten, even if it was a corner shot over there and he's standing at the net. Yeah, he had very high expectations of himself in everything, and that was definitely displayed on the tennis court. So, Barbara and family, you had an absolute treasure, and you know that. And I know you miss him. Victor, who is not here, he's working this morning. Myself and Terry were down on the court that morning with Paul. I was the first one by his side. I got a chance to be right next to him, and I shared this with Barbara and the family, and I hesitated to share it, but I think it's worth letting everybody know. I'm not a deep mystical kind of guy, but I dreamt about Paul one night, and I dreamt that he called me on the phone and thanked me for being with him on the court, thanked me for being out there with him that morning, thanked me, told me to make sure I thanked all the guys and tell them how much they meant to him, and that he was going to be okay. And when I woke up the next morning, I remembered that dream vividly, and I don't usually remember dreams that clearly, and I knew that he had passed on. And I found out later that morning that he had passed that during that time period. But I think that was his way of saying, don't worry about him. He's okay. And we're going to see him again, and he's playing tennis, and he could beat Nadal or any of the rest of them if he wanted to right now. So thank you for your love and support of us, Barbara, and your family. And these also have Paul's initials on them. He was diligent about that, and I'm going to leave these up here in memory of him as well. Thank you.
There was a real popular TV series called Friday Night Lights. Paul Rusko invented Friday Night Lights way back in the 1970s. He could do 4 football games in one night on Friday nights. He could start in South River, then he'd swing by Annapolis High School, then he would go to Savannah Park High School, and he'd always finish at Old Mill High School. Somehow he'd do 4 football games in one night. He's the guy that invented Friday night. Where's that? State senator. She taught youth Paul, parents that are there, and he does so many things for Ocean High. We're going to jump into our education segment of it. Hal Kramer is going to talk. Hal was an elementary school teacher. Ian, stand up real quick, please. His wife and Hal taught together. And my three children would be in the first, third, and fifth grade. And for dinner, what kind of day did you have? Oh, Dad, we had a great day. We had the Kramers. They had Ian, Art. They had Hal, phys ed. My kids were happy that night. Lovely.
I was also lucky enough to have Paul as my very first way back a long time ago. But thinking on the way down today, I think my wife Ann, here we go. My wife Ann probably has the longest association with Paul, other than Barbara, I think, of anybody here, because Paul would tell this. I would remind him of this story whenever we get together, and he would always laugh. One time he was telling me Ann knew him as a little kid at Andover Pool, which he managed. He knew Andover Pool back in Winterthur. And he said one day he was thinking back, and he said, I can still see those two skinny kids, Ann and her brother, coming up to the pool to swim. And he paused for a minute. He said, they weren't bad kids. And then he paused and said, well, they were kind of bad kids. So that, I can't tell you when that was. I would have to tell my wife's age. She would get mad at me. But I'll give you a hint. Eisenhower might have been president back then. Anyway. So as a 11-year-old 7th grader at the new Corcoran Middle School back in Denver, Paul was our PE teacher. And what a lucky time that was for me. That kind of set the course of my life, actually. And I can vividly remember it was the very first PE class. Paul brought us into the locker room. I'm not sure I'd ever been in the locker room before, to tell you the truth. Sat us all down on the bench, all boys. Started going over his expectations, the rules, and all that. And we were a little intimidated when he started talking about we'd have to change into our uniform and take showers. That was enough. And then I would remind him of this story, and he would always laugh. Then he said out loud for everybody to hear that we would also have to wear a jockstrap. And this is in the early 60s. It's a much different time, a much more innocent time. But when he said that, the whole class kind of cringed like this, and he said it out loud. We were so embarrassed that somebody out in the hallway would hear those words, and to make it worse, he said it again later on. And God always kind of tickled him when I reminded him of that. But it didn't take long that this whole new world opened up. This is in the early 60s, so none of the 7th graders had much athletic background. There weren't the youth sports like there are today. So all of a sudden we were playing basketball and playing soccer. Who knew what soccer was in the early 60s? Gymnastics and the trampoline and high jumping into a sawdust pit. And after school and before school activities, we could stay after for intramurals. We could do the gymnastics club. We could come in early for the 100-mile club. We had PE twice a week, but you could be in the gym pretty much every day if you wanted to, if you got involved in enough things. And so it just opened up a whole new world, I know, for me and for a lot of those kids back then. That started us on a lifetime of activity and fitness, just like Paul lived up his whole life. But when I think about it, he might not have been having as much fun as we were, because that was his last year teaching. After that year, he moved into administration, went to open the new Northeast High School, and then soon enough he was down at the central office and was the supervisor of PE and athletics. And that gave him a chance to spread the program he had at Corcoran to the whole county. And under his time, Anne Arundel County became a real leader in PE in the state and beyond. And think of in the 60s and 70s, the population of Anne Arundel was just exploding. There were several new schools opening every year. Now the new school opens is a big deal, but back then there were several each year. So think of the people he hired, the dozens, hundreds probably of teachers that he hired and coaches that he hired, facilities that he planned. I remember when he retired, he told me that I asked him what was he most proud of, and he said it was that he got central funding going in the county, which doesn't sound, like a big deal, but
paved the way so all schools were funded the same. That it wasn't each school had to go out and raise their own money for their athletic program, for their PE program, which is still the way in some other counties. But anyway, so the impact he had as an administrator, I mean, it's going on today. It affected me when I got to high school as a student athlete. My son is a student up through the county as an athlete, and now a granddaughter that's feeling the same effects from that. And I'll tell one more story about him that really tells me what kind of leader he was. At the beginning of each school year, we would have in Anne Arundel County, the special area teachers would all meet together at one spot. So PE people, 300 teachers, usually would be at Old Mill High School. It was a fun time. You saw people you didn't see but once or twice a year. And when he would start his announcements, as part of his announcements, he would ask everybody who had reached 30 years to stand up, which is a milestone when you're a teacher. You can retire. Anyway, and he didn't have notes. He didn't know ahead of time who was going to stand up. Some years there would be 2 or 3 people. Some years there'd be a dozen people. And he'd go one by one to each person and say, okay, so Smith over here. I remember you started your first few years at such and such a school, and then you transferred and you were split between these 2 schools. And then he'd recount everybody's career for their 30 years, just from memory, which really shows how much he cared about us as teachers. I don't know many administrators that could do that. I know administrators didn't know all the teachers that they had under them, let alone people they taught with. So it was a fortunate time in my life that I met him. And for everybody.
Mary Beth, you know Ned Carey from the House of Delegates representing Brooklyn Park. Ned called me this week and talked about today. In 1980, Ned played first base for a state championship. He says, Coach, Paul Rusko was at that game. There's an 18-year-old kid. This occurred 40 years ago. He remembers Paul Rusko. Paul opened 7 different high schools in Anne Arundel County. 2 of them he was on the staff. The 5 other schools, he would be there in athletic facilities and working with the physical education department. Some of my staff from Broadneck was here, and we were opened up in 1981. And Paul or Gene Boyd would be at my school once a week helping me. There's an award given every year at every high school. The Paul Rusko Award, the Gene Boyd Award, honoring their contributions to education. And that's going to last forever. It's a special place. I want to talk about equity, and we'll talk about equality. I met Paul in 1970. When Paul came into Anne Arundel County, we were a deeply segregated society. We had a high school called Bates, and every African American student went through Bates. Paul's a gentleman that had to go ahead and lead us athletically, physical education wise, through the integration of athletics. And I think that our minority coaches felt very comfortable with Paul because they were going to get a fair shake. Pat Chance, put your arm up real quick. Pat, coach women's basketball at Old Mill, numerous state championships. Paul is the Title IX person in Anne Arundel County. The Title IX is so good in our county. The Baltimore County and Baltimore City asked Paul to come over and work with their people to teach them about Title IX. Talk about equity. There's no such thing as major and minor sports. Go to a county wrestling meet, go to a gymnastics meet, and watch Paul at these particular things that are considered minor sports. He made sure every coach and every athlete that day, their sport was extremely special. Talk about student athletes. When Paul came into the county, you passed 4 out of 6 subjects, 4 D's, 2 E's, you are eligible to play high school sports. I was on the committee with Paul that changed it. We got it to a 2.0. You got to pass 5 out of 6. And Paul said, hold up. What are we going to do with the kids struggling academically? He can't play in games, but he can stay on his team for 15 days. After 15 days, we're going to give him a second chance to get eligible so he can play. And I wish Paul was still involved in the game today. We make a mistake telling kids who have had an alcohol and drug offense, death sentence, you can't play any more athletics at all. That may be the only family that kid has. If Paul was alive, he'd be working, making sure these kids are still involved in things. I knew Mr. Rusko from 1970 to 2015. 2015, I met Paul Rusko when I moved here. And I want to tell you what this bench means to me. It's all about being a good husband. In 2016, Peter, I went to meet you in a Ravens game with your dad, and Paul told me, make sure you're at the house at 7 o'clock. That means you're going to get there at 7. He's saying goodbye to Barbara, and I'm watching these two affections, emotions, after all these years of marriage, and it gave me appreciation for Paul as a husband. Paula would come down here and watch Paul and I play tennis. Then she'd have the courage to go to McDonald's and sit with this crazy group and argue about everything. I saw Paul's role as a dad. Logan, where are you? Last year, Logan hit a home run. Paul couldn't wait to show me the video on his phone of his grandson hitting that. And then the last aspect is I learned what kind of friend Paul could be. I had hip surgery in late October. I have to be at the hospital at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, Paul says, I'm coming by at 5:30 to pick you up. That means at 20 after 5, I better be on the front porch. I'm after early. So Paul doesn't drop me off. He's got to walk me in, make sure I get checked in, make sure everything is right where it needs to be. And his friendship is fantastic. So there are the 4 things I'm going to remember when I look at that bench. It's not about what Hall of Fame he's in. It's not about winning games and all that. It's about being a husband, a father, a grandfather, being a good friend. Thank you. Now we go to the table. Who's up first? This young man teaches at Indian Creek. He is assistant athletic director. He's following his grandfather's lead, and he's going to talk about what his grandfather meant to him in his life, and then he's going to introduce Paul's children one at a time.
So, good morning, I guess, still. I'm Jason Warner. I have the honor and privilege of being Paul Rusko's grandson. Pop. He's Pop. It's a little bit overwhelming, kind of seeing his impact in front of me. I was confused my first day of school in first grade when Mr. Kramer said, "How's your grandfather doing?" I was like, "How does this guy know who my pop is?" It's great. To be able to kind of see it all right now is certainly overwhelming. Nothing that anyone has said before me should be a surprise to anybody, and that's kind of what Pop was. You knew what you were going to get. You knew he cared, and he truly made you feel like when he was talking to you was you were the only person that existed. A very rare gift, and I think everyone here probably has that moment when he inspired you, not by being over the top or exaggerating, but by truly deeply knowing and caring about you and making you feel that you can do just about anything you want. Shocker, I'm a teacher, aspiring athletic administrator, coach, father, as a coach, we make a little game plan. We know what we're going to say when we get there, and oftentimes, once you get in front of your team, you have to totally switch it up. So that's kind of where I find myself today. What I was hoping to say or wanted to say, it doesn't match. It's got to come from the heart. And that's a trait I think I get from my grandfather. It kind of reminds me of a story. I haven't really shared this with too many people, but I'm super fortunate that not only was he my grandfather, and I got to have him in that light of being Pop and not really knowing what his life was outside of our weekends and things together. But I will certainly always cherish the opportunity that I had to not only be his grandson, but have that relationship evolve into a friendship and a collegial relationship where about things that were going on in our life as men, not just as a kid. And it really reminds me back about, it's probably close to 20 years ago, before I went off to college, not really knowing, all I knew was I wanted to play lacrosse. I didn't know what I wanted to do after. And he wrote me a letter in his perfect handwriting. And the sum up the letter, it said, just remember that right now you have an opportunity to do and be whatever it is that you want to be. And as an 18-year-old, I was like, all right, I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to get rich. I'm going to build a mansion. But over time, you start to figure out what's really important, and having him as someone who can kind of show you without telling you what's important in life, and that you can build something like this, like he has and has provided for all of us. So that kind of, I always kind of go back to that. He truly believed that, and he truly inspired that confidence in people to just go and be who you want to be who you are. And I think that everyone here probably has one of those stories. And I just want to thank all of you for one, being here, but for also sharing and keeping that going. I know you all do. A lot of you are in education and aim to inspire people every day. So on behalf of myself and my cousins and the grandkids, Kaylee, who was shocker on the sideline coaching a lacrosse game this morning, Jordan, Grace, and Jack, who couldn't be here, of course Logan, Russell. I want to thank you for being a part of his life, because I can't imagine. It's hard to even fathom how much he gave to us and was still able to give to others. And I guess I would challenge myself and challenge you to please keep that going, and I know that you will. Thank you all for being here, and it's really great seeing your faces. I think next up is my mother, definitely.
Well, like my son, and we've got some that came before us, script is kind of gone. Tennis balls in my dad's honor. Tennis balls didn't last very long term. We had a lot of balls that we would take home for our kids that I thought were perfectly acceptable, because he didn't, he had a good supply for us. Well, I find it hard to separate my mom and my dad from each other, because they were this team that, such a team that early on, my grandson Wesley called him Grandpop. He's going to go to Grandpop's house, and it was stuck together. So when I speak about my dad, I speak about my mom, and all of this couldn't happen if it weren't for the entire team of all of you and all of us working together, and some of our dear friends and our cousins who are here today. But go back to before all of this a little bit, and maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but my dad might not have become an educator. He was raised around in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and it was mostly his brother, his mother, and himself, along with a big Italian family. And that's important because we had a lot of support. But he started working young. He was paperboy, and that was the first time that I heard about work ethic. And that was where you put the paper where the client wanted it to be. And your tips got better, and you got to keep your job. But he knew the right way to deal with people, and maybe those people were grouchy too, some of them. But he knew what to do, and that was the beginning. So he must have been born knowing just what to do, and he had good people around him. So he worked in the coal mine in high school, which I find that to be really interesting and hard, reading what I read and the kinds of things that he did with hot stuff and dynamite, and going down early in the morning with his lunch, I think, got packed for him. And she said that Uncle Junior, they would eat it before lunchtime. They would eat it for breakfast on the way to work. So that's a really long day in a really hot place, without like you just want to get food. You're hungry, you go to the vending machine. But no, not my dad. And then his family were also racehorses, had racehorses, and he worked it, lived with the racehorse, slept with them, trained them, transported them, and it ultimately bought one with a partner. And that didn't go well, apparently. And so the horse race came off the table, but what was next? My father hitchhiked to college to Lock Haven. And I imagine that he probably had his bag. It may not have been ratty, but he may have had his bag with him and not much more. And he had called Coach Jack, I think that's his name, and wanted to play the two sports because he was a two-sport athlete. And he loved athletics, but he wanted to enroll in a teacher's college. So he enrolled in elementary ed because, why? It was the least expensive, right? So that lasted for a little bit, and he got into physical education, and then the rest is history. Going back to his athletics, my father really took care of things early on. As I said, he actually disenrolled himself from parochial school and enrolled himself back into public school because he wanted to play football. So he was able to just take care of that. Play football. So he went back to public school and he played football. And just by the turn of some events, his eligibility ran out. He got to play his years, and he coached for that last year. Now, some kids don't do that, right? They say, John, this happened. He coached. So I'd like to think sometimes that might have been sort of the beginning of a lot of things. And then we know what he did in the county. But they went to Springfield College to get his master's. And my mom worked, and he worked. I think he coached or had somewhere. And I went to daycare. And he and I spent a lot of time together. And that's my first memory of him that I can pull out of my without a picture or something. And that is that we ate black olives for a can. And that was my first gymnastics experience because I think he balanced all of us, but he balanced me on his hands and his feet, and I trusted him up there, did airplanes and did things, and we did headstands, and I think our trailer was like 10 feet wide or something like that. It wasn't much, but we spent a lot of time together. And we were all pretty close, 10 feet wide trailer. And then that was another experience, fortunately, because my parents did such a good job, I have no memory of. I was a little kind of maybe busy, as some other people might be, and I think that's a good thing. And I managed to burn my arm while we were there. And I'm sure with their first parrot panic is what I came up with that. And they took care of it real well as a team. I know nothing of it, and I barely have a scar. So I think that's remarkable from the very beginning for them to take off, for my father to have taken off from what he knew, for them to take off and go off to away again to college, and do this together. A little story about my parents meeting each other. I don't really exactly know how they met, except that my father was ahead of my mother in school, and he worked in the dining hall, and I think this is really cute, that he was a little bit in charge, let's just say. And my mother came in, and she worked in the front of the house, he worked at the back of the house. And maybe my mom could fill in some blanks, but I'm not thinking that my dad was probably in his mode of working, and my mother needed to go to him to get something, and she's a freshman going to ask the hall a couple of years older to help serve the football players or what needed to be done. And there was a way to get things done. Well, they worked that out, but maybe in the dining hall wasn't their very first meeting. May not have been the best first meeting, but they managed to get outside of the dining hall world, and all of that happened in a short period of time through Springfield. Oh, let's see. So I also remember being able to say "slap the mat, daddy." How many kids get to say "slap the mat, daddy"? Because my dad was the official and the wrestling official, and I just thought that's what everybody did. I was rooting for the official. Who does that? Well, now I am married to an official, and my son is an official, and my daughter's been an official, so we always have to root for the official. But I think that is a pretty special thing. I was a little falcon, I think, back in the day. I had a gymnastics coach, a swim coach, a tennis coach in my house all the time. He taught me to play tennis. He helped many of us down the pool to get our A patch. Anne may have been included, I don't know, but if you got your A patch at Andover pool, that meant you could go off the diving board, and that was a big deal, Mr. Rusko. That in itself is huge. Tennis, swimming, gymnastics. We had our own home gym, outdoor. Before it was fashionable, fact check with Paul a little bit. We had high bar. We had a high bar. and we had parallel bars that were shaky, but they were on the ground. But my dad could stand on those things on his hands and go around. It was kind of amazing. What else do I have on my list in that line? My dad, he was everywhere. My dad was everywhere, as Tim said. And as a child, you would think that would be awful to have your father everywhere. But he knew how to do it with us. He didn't get on our turf, let's just say. When he was there as Rusko, was there as Rusko, thank you. And when he was there as my dad, he was there. But here's my dad, and he knew his role. I remember just one time being at a basketball game at Glen Burnie, and he was standing in the entrance, because I probably stood kind of at the entrance because he was going to get everywhere, and I was in the stands. Never. That was, everybody had their spot, and I greatly appreciate that. Let's see. Can't see. Provided us, whole statement, I know it's not, I didn't make this up. He gave us everything we needed and almost everything we wanted. I'd say 99.9% of what we wanted. He made sure we all had the right vehicle to drive. I got to drive a classic VW bug stick shift in heat all the time until he quit. And then when he went off to get me a car, he did just that. He went out in his car and called and said, black or white. That was my choice. He got me a Toyota Corolla, and we're still in the Toyota family today. That's just my dad. He saw it, what had to be done, and he took care of it, whether it was for us, for you, for the thousands of students and teachers that he worked with. Tony will tell you that he was a fierce competitor on the racquetball court. He really did. He played hard, as you all know, there. I love listening to conversations that we have with Jason and Haley about what they're into. Jason talked about that as an adult of late. There's the dome at Indian Creek. My dad was fascinated by that. He was fascinated and curious about so many things, and just genuinely interested in you and curious, and not in the no secret curious way, just curious about everything. And I think they pass that along. I am definitely proud that my kids and my husband and our family have followed in his path. Haley is on she's gone back to be on the court. My dad would have wanted that to be. She had to make big arrangement changes for a trip because she's on the court. I know how hard it is to be a coach's wife, a coach's family. My dad did it with excellence and ease. I don't remember him not being there for us. I don't recall any of that. It was always he could just do it all. I mean, he really could get it all done and get it all done well. His workout is really important to him, as you all know. And it's very important to many of us in our family. I was having trouble with all of this, but I had a workout, much needed workout the other day, and then I got a really good sleep, which was really interesting. But another thing came to my head, a song, a Maren Moore's song, and it said, "If the bones are good, the rest don't matter." And it said, "The house don't fall if my bones are good." And my dad told my mom that he wanted to have strong bones. My dad had strong bones, physically and mentally. He was a strong man that could accomplish so much. And I do know that the power of that workout meant a lot to him. He scheduled it in. Most people fit it in, but he scheduled it in. I see that in my kids. I see them keeping themselves healthy. I saw it in Betsy this morning. She scheduled that in. Haley she ran through artichokes in California while we were out there. She could have skipped all that. My dad wouldn't have skipped it. He would have scheduled it in. And I think that is one of the biggest legacies that he leaves, is that he taught people and mental health so important. And until the very end, he had strong bones, right? Out here, I would encourage all of us to do that. Just see if I missed anything, because there's so much. There's so much here. His name is Pop, and that's the last thing. It's cute. So his name is Pop. But when we called my parents on the corded phone. They could have been on the two separate phones or sharing a phone to say that we were expecting. My dad said, "The child going to call me, Coach, Mr. Rusko," and we really fully expected that it might be Coach or something like that because that would be the way. So it became Pop, and now after 4 grandchildren, you got Pop, you got Popsicle, you got Popsicle, you got lots of different names along the way, and he took them all. And so he just loved us all, and just met us where we all were. Jason would say, we're grateful for the life that my parents gave us. You're amazing. Thank you. All of us. Oh, all of my little sister, and sometimes we say my mom and my dad. Right. But it's ours. Here she is.
I think the theme of today is the presence of that absence is everywhere. I think it's been real clear today that my dad has affected so many lives, and we're all sharing stories of the different places that he met each of you and each of us. I'm extremely honored that I am Colin Rusko, born to Paul Lawrence Rusko, so I'm the namesake. And I've always been proud of my dad. I'll tell you, when I was in Glenbury Park Elementary School, and Mr. Holmes was my PE teacher, and my dad would come running in the door, and you know, he had that laser focus. He didn't see you, he didn't talk, he just went to wherever the place was he was supposed to be. And I just remember feeling like, that's my dad. You know, some kids, they see their parents and look at, you know, I went, that wasn't me. You know, I was always proud to have my dad come into the schools and get to see what we were doing. Fast forward that to high school, where he'd come into Old Mill High, and I was a really good girl, but one day I decided that I was going to go out for lunch, and we had a closed campus, didn't we, Pat? And I went out in my cheerleading uniform, and I come running back in, and my nose is red, and my hands are cold, and who do I run smack dab into my dad? And he said, "Hey, Paul, how you doing? There's no G on him. How you doing?" And I went on and did not tell him that story that I've been put in school for 10 years, so he retired. I thought, I'm good, I'm a mom, I have children, I fess up that I cut school. But a couple things about my dad that make me so proud to be his namesake is we share a lot of the same routine. I'm a get up before dawn, get out the door, get the exercise done, because by the time 7 o'clock comes around, other people want from you. And so that's my time early in the morning to do just what my dad would do. I'm known to wear a fanny pack, whether it's in style or not, and we all know that Pop never was without a fanny pack. Dad's a phone talker, and I like to talk on the phone too. Right, Tom? I talk on the phone, my cousin. So with my distance, I've typically not lived in Maryland. I've lived in California and Virginia. So Dad and I had regular phone calls, and we would talk about food, recipes, which I've never followed a recipe in my life like that. We would talk about Ravens, Orioles, New York Yankees, cars, plumbing, whatever project I was into, my dad was vested. And that's again something that I think everybody's hit on. If you had an interest, it became Dad's interest, Pop's interest. Each of my children, I asked them to give me an adjective, just one adjective to describe your grandfather. And my middle daughter said, "Just one?" in capital letters. I can't describe Pop with one word. So I'll just go through a few of what they said. Integrity, present, He was interested in you. He was interested in the person that was in front of him. He loved to tell a story, and he'd shake that big, meaty Italian finger, and you knew he meant business. Pepperoni rolls. Our son Jack is a chef, and pepperoni rolls are one of the things that his grandfather helped him perfect, and he shares with anybody who will eat them. On behalf of my mom, I just want to say that in our conversations, and I got the okay from her, my dad loved her with every ounce of his being, and it was evident to all of us. The mutual respect, the communication that I've been married 32 years, and we all know it's no walk in the park, but we had the gold standard model in our presence. You know, I'm 58, and she's somewhere 60. I don't know, for a really long time, you know, and we all looked to them, and they never inserted their opinion unless you asked. And I think about it more now that he's not here than maybe I did when he was. But none of what happened with my parents got lost on any of us. It's there. And I want to mention our Wesley Call. Wesley Call, Jason's son, is named after both his grandfathers, which is an honor. But Wesley Call, when he refers to his grandparents, it's one word, grandpapa. Grandpapa, one person to him. And that is symbolic of who they were as partners, friends. Dad was my mom's best friend. He's my best friend too, you know. But I love that Wesley identified that before he even knew what that really meant. So, thank you, Mom. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm just looking through this crowd, and I'm seeing Pat Smith, who I went to high school. Pat Chance was here. Just people from all parts of our lives. This front row is just amazing. And I'm so appreciative of each of you. And I know when you all look at this bench, you're going to think of my dad and the experiences you've had with him. Maybe a little bit differently. I know I will. He taught us all that we're strong like bullets. We wear it on our hearts. We wear it on our bodies different ways. But that is one takeaway from our family is he made us all strong like bullets, even if we don't want to be. We are. And thank you, Daddy. I know you're here with us. I know you're here with us. My brother. This is my brother, Peter Christian Rusko, and he is my parents' #1 favorite son. Our baby brother.
So this is what I got. And, if you ever sat next to my dad in church, this is probably what the program was like. He was a doodler. So I'm doodling, so bear with me as I go through this. My dad was a teacher, obviously, professionally and at home. The professional part, don't need to talk about it anymore. Everyone knows he's well accomplished. It's the personal side, his teaching, that I'd like to touch on. He had 3 kids. You've seen us all right at this point who had kids. So my dad never got a break. Not that he wanted a break, he just didn't get that opportunity. He was a dad, and with that came the inherent, sometimes unappreciated, but incredibly invaluable job of teaching us. Personally, I'm pretty sure I wore him out throughout the years. If you didn't know it, we were always learning from him, simply by observing. Sure, he taught me to learn how to dive so I get my A patch. He taught me to throw a ball, shoot a basket. I played with that. He taught me to drive a stick shift, drive a nail, all these things that I still do today. But it's the things that he did that are harder to put into words. My dad was a high character guy. Everyone here knows that. He was a hard worker, and he was a family man, without question. All things that I respect and tried to take from him. He was very funny. My dad was very serious. All that funny side to balance himself out. Always would joke with my mom. I would get in on that. I thought it was great. I still try to joke with her today. It's a good time for me. My dad and I would do it, and we'd both get a chuckle out of it. We would joke with her about her drinking, which is not true. That was one of our big things. Tell her not to overdo it at bars, which of course they never did. I do that with my family now. Much to their dismay, I think I'm funnier than I probably really am. But I keep going with it, and I don't care what they say. Some other things that I will always remember, and I'll certainly miss, is talking sports, and Paul touched on this, but my dad and I became really close friends. So if we had a conversation, if sports weren't involved, then we probably wouldn't talk. We talked baseball, we talked football, lacrosse, you name it, we talked about it. Wrestling was our biggest thing. We constantly. We weren't watching wrestling or sport together. We're probably on the phone as the game was going on, talking about it. I'll miss those conversations. He was interested in any project I was doing pretty much every day. He was as interested in it as if he was doing the project himself. I just had my own. I got to have a pipe replaced. I know that's not interesting at all. It's very expensive, but he would have been all over it. He would have wanted to know all about it. He liked to know. He'd always ask about my family. He was always tickled when I would tell him how much Logan Kennedy just used a horse. I don't know where it goes, but he was always amazed at how long my wife, when she was studying for her nursing degree, could sit on that recliner chair, hours on end studying. We think she wore it then, but we won't get rid of it. I have many memories from my dad. There's no way in the world I could go through them all. A couple that stand out. In 2000, my dad and I took a trip to St. Louis, and we saw the NCAA wrestling championship. That was amazing. We didn't see the whole thing, but we saw 4 days worth. And just to have a boys' trip, which is a great time. But my fondest memories, because they've lasted so long now, all revolve around the Ravens. My dad, Tony, we've had season tickets with the Ravens since they came to town in 1996. So my dad and I have attended countless amounts of games. Even though they like to leave in the third quarter, there's still plenty of time to have a good time, and we did. I can't thank him enough for. I don't know if he had the foresight to think that this was going to form some kind of bond, but just give him credit. He probably did. And, it's the same tradition. I've continued tradition with the tickets. Logan and I've gone through a lot of games together, and my family knows anyone's welcome to go whenever they want to. And there's memories at those games. They include everybody. They get Tony, Jason, sisters are gone. Kaylee's not here. Mom even went one time or two. Adam, Kaylee. I'm sure I'm missing people, but it's a lot. It's a lot. Plus the drunk people. There's just a lot to talk about. The guy that fell down the steps. There's a lot. It's just been a big part of our lives. That football team, it's just a purple football team. Have meant a lot to a lot of us. Finally, the thing I'll take away, a ton of things, but I'm going to mention one is my dad's the importance that he put on emphasis. He put on family. So, among many of the lessons, that's one he had taught me. And one I'll always take and try to keep it together, at home, and not forget about it. I'll never not miss him. I'll never not miss him yelling at the field, the players on the field, or chanting Ravens, or don't be a jerk. Yeah, that's true. That really happened. He was not. But thank you all for coming. In the spirit of my dad, go Ravens.
Well, what do you say after all that? All I can say is thank you to all of you. Hey, it's wonderful things to see. To all of you who are here from the neighborhood, from across the bridge from Pennsylvania, guys, whatever they said, I had no clue. I was with Paula 2 weeks in California, and she came back with me. Stayed with me a week. I didn't know. Beth would ask me questions from time to time, and maybe she would play info. And Peter, all he would say is, "It's all going to work out. It'll be okay." I was surprised. You're such a guy. Well, I feel like Paul is here someplace. I feel like he's with us today. He might be somewhere here among us on the ground, or he may be up there in the blue sky that's coming through the clouds. But wherever he is, he is and so proud, and yet so wonderful things said about it. So let's all take all that we heard today and remember him as you know, all our own feelings. I love you all. You're my heart. We had 53 years of marriage, and they were all good. They had their ups and downs. They had their rough spots. 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren. We were blessed, and we knew it every day. We didn't take anything for granted. We were 2 poor kids that never college. We thundered on through, made a wonderful life, a lot of good friends, and a marvelous family. So, Bill started off with the invitation. I'd like to do this. May God bless you. May He make His face to shine upon you and give you